Especially being a realtor and being really boss type of thing. It's like, well, I can sit on the couch and watch TV all day, or I can get out. I spoke last month. Too bad you weren't here. Oh, yes. I'm just kind of learning about all the networking and making dates and stuff like that. So. I'm sitting right over there.
Can everyone? There we go. We're going to go ahead and get started. I guess we're getting started.
All right, thank you for coming out on such a chilly morning. It's not a record breaker. We've had folks here at 13 below, so thanks for being here at First Fridays here in Fort Wayne. Just real quick for my own personal interest, how many of you this is your first time being here? All right, good. So we have more alum than we do newbies, but thanks for being here. We appreciate you being here. First Fridays has been going since November of last year. If this is your first time, if you haven't visited our site, you can go to firstfridaysfw.com. And an exciting thing for those who've been coming for a while, right now in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati First Fridays is starting. So they started a couple months ago, and they're going to be running through May as well. You'll notice, or throughout the morning, you're going to notice my brother Jerry is not here today. He had surgery on Monday, outpatient surgery. But he's on YouTube Live right now. I think he is anyway. Hi, Jerry. Yeah. He would much rather, believe me, he would much rather be here. It was outpatient surgery, but it's still quite painful. And he said he's been up since 1 a.m. this morning, just dealing with the pain. So he would much rather be here than where he's at right now. So hopefully he'll have a speedy recovery and get here. All right. We're just going to dive right in. I'm going to introduce you to our speaker. Jan will wrap some things up, and we'll talk just, again, the easiest way to keep track of what's going on here is to go to our website. There's a follow button. You'll get emails when things get posted. We have a calendar of events there. We run through May, and then in June we're going to have a women's event. Jan is putting together a team for that. It's going to probably be 3 times. Today's speaker, actually the last couple of weeks, we've had kind of government couple of weeks. We had Matt Conkler last month. Today we have Marlin Stutzman. Most of you probably know who he is. Marlin has probably one of the most varied backgrounds. I don't know why you're not 80. All the things that he's done, if you look on Eventbrite, grew up on a farm in Howe, Indiana, helps run the family farm, a power equipment business. Is the trucking company still? Sort of. It's parked right now. He and his wife started, and I still can't get my head around this, a bridal shop in Virginia, but I believe your sister-in-law and brother-in-law run that. Yeah. And she's taken it, from what he told me, kind of new levels. In fact, when he and I had lunch not long ago, she was in Milan, I think, speaking at a bridal show. So I still can't figure out how a farm boy in Howe, Indiana could be in a bridal shop. I don't know how that all happened. But if you followed his career, he served in the state of Indiana in our state legislature, and then became the 3rd District Representative here in Northeast Indiana. He did a fantastic job there. They live up in Middlebury now. He's married to Christy, who just won office in the 49th District here in the state of Indiana, and 2 boys. Right. So we are very privileged to have somebody like Marlin, and I just said, like I said, when I read all of that, I'm thinking he can't be as young as he is and have done all that, but he has. You were one of the youngest people in the State House or even in Congress?
Both. Yeah, both.
Both, all right. So he's 13 now. So let's give a warm First Fridays welcome to Marlin.
Good morning. Can you all hear me in the back okay? All right, great. Well, it's great to be here, and a nice chilly morning. Thanks,
Jim for the introduction and appreciate the invitation. Jim and I, we met, I don't know how long ago it was.
In January.
Before, so was it January? And I put it on the calendar for December, whatever the day is, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 7th. And I was thinking, man, that's a long way away. And it's here, and it's great to be here, and appreciate the opportunity to share. What a great organization here that Jim and Jerry are building. We were talking about First Fridays and all the different opportunities. We had fun at lunch and brainstorming, because what I find that life's about is about people, and I'll talk a little bit about that this morning. But whenever we get together and you're with someone, you walk away generally with some new energy, with some new ideas, and this excitement of, hey, what's next? What can we do next together? And as I had the privilege to travel a lot over my lifetime so far, I always, whenever I come back home, I'm like, this is a good place to live. It's a great place to live. Now, besides 22-degree weather and ice on your windshield, it's still a great place to live. And I always, whenever I come home, and I have had the experience of seeing other countries or talking with other people around the country, I always come back home and say, Northeast Indiana is a great place to raise a family. It's a great place to do business. It's a great place to live. And I count myself very fortunate to be from here. Jim asked me just to share a little bit about my background, and he talked a little bit about that in the introduction. But I do want to get into one little piece towards leadership at the very end. And I thought what I would do is talk for about 30 minutes or so. I don't want to bore you, but I enjoy Q&A. And so if that's something that you got a question or thought, I like to open it up because I like the interaction. So be thinking about that. If there's anything that you have a question about or a comment you want to make, we'll probably do that about 25, 20 still or so. But so I grew up on a farm, as Jim mentioned, never ever expecting to be in politics. I don't even consider myself a politician. I go to school. I didn't want to be a lawyer. Not that anything's wrong with being a lawyer, but I wanted to be a business guy. I wanted to have a big farming operation, and I wanted to have a large trucking operation. As you can hear already, the trucking operation isn't doing as well as it should be, but it could be if we would want to focus on it. But I grew up in Howe, and when my dad and my mom were both hard-working people. They got married very young in life. My dad was 19, my mom was 17. I added up the calendar one day, and I was like, okay, that happened fast. So they started out very young, and it was a hard start for them. And as I learned more about their story, I appreciate them even more today than what I did years and years ago, because of the difficulty and the challenges that they have. And now they're sharing with my 17-year-old son that if you're dating, take your time. It's not, you don't have to hurry. There's no rush. And I just think 17 is too young to date now. It's like, that's the point, I'm not getting married until you're 38. But he's telling me otherwise. And she's a cute girl. She's really nice, great family. But it's that point in life where I'm at, and I'm like, I'm kind of glad to be back home, stationed a little bit more, and able to raise our two boys, Peyton and Preston, who are 17 and 12. But back to my parents, they started young, and what I learned from them throughout life so far is that if you work hard, you can get to where you want to go. And there's so many different routes that we take to find success in life. And but the one thing that I know is if you work hard, good things will happen. So as they started out, they were my grandfather had a farm. It wasn't large enough. My dad went off and worked for another farmer in the area, a large farm. And then my mom, she was a part-time teacher, and then she eventually worked at Arc of LaGrange in LaGrange County with special needs, and did that for almost 15 years. And they just sacrificed so much for us four kids. And I remember times that I didn't know the struggles that they were dealing with, and the challenges that they had, but later found out that they really did sacrifice a lot for us kids. But so when I was about 18 years old, just out of high school, and really trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, I didn't go to college right away. And it's one of the things that, looking back, I always tell my boys, it's like, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to college right after you're out of high school, and you're going to get it done. I said, I didn't do that. And I want you to just to get it done, and then you can move on with life. And but at the same time, I don't look back with a lot of regrets, because God takes us different routes in life, and it's not always the same. And so I just know that the experiences I had then helped lead me to where I'm at today. And so soon after high school, I knew I wanted to be a big farmer, started this big trucking operation, and I worked at that for about 5 years and found some success. Farming's tough, trucking's tough. Those are the two things in industry that I found that have the smallest margins, and you control the least amount in the industry. And it's like, so why did I pick two of the hardest industries to be a part of? Well, then I did, 9/11 happened, and Christy and I had been married just a little over a year, and our son Peyton was 3 weeks old. He was born in August of 2001. September 11th happens in September of 2001, and I'm holding this baby boy in my hands, and I'm thinking, this little boy has his entire life in front of him. I mean, you all remember where you were at that day. I mean, we all remember. And to think, I was thinking, this little boy, what's this country going to look like? I mean, it was one of those days you just sat there and didn't know what was happening in the world. And I knew at that point, like a lot of other friends, that they wanted to do something. They wanted to have, help turn things around, help fix whatever just happened. And I was at a golf event, and I was driving home, and I saw one of the signs, a billboard there around Kendallville, that said, join the Air National Guard in Fort Wayne. And so I get home, and I told Christy, I said, I just saw a sign. I think I'm supposed to join the military. And she said, no, you did not see a sign. That's probably not a good idea. And I said, well, we got to do something. And so we started getting involved in politics in our local community there at LaGrange. And had some great advice from people saying, hey, you run for this office or run for this office if you want to make an impact here. And I was green as could be. I was 24 years old, and but I didn't know anything about politics. I did listen to WoWo radio in the tractor, and got to know some of the talk show hosts and things like that. But I just knew that I wanted to help, and that was the one thing that I learned through that time period from my dad and my grandfather. That my grandfather was so good at helping other people, and my dad was so good at helping other people. And to me, while I didn't recognize it as leadership at the time, that's what they were doing. They were helping to lead by listening to what other people were saying, helping them in time of need, and always being willing to be a servant leader. And so I decided, well, we're going to run for a state representative seat. And so I put my name on the ballot, and Christy, her godfather, was a state senator in South Carolina, so talked to him, and I called him up one night, and I said, David, I said, I'm going to run for office. I said, but before I do that, before I commit, should I go back to school and learn how to do this? And I just remember him saying, buddy, you can't go back to school and learn politics. He said, you can't learn this stuff. You just got to jump in it and go. And so I was like, okay, well, that's what we're going to do. And so we ran. It was one of the best experiences I had in life, because they said, you need to go out and go door to door. You need to go out and talk to your neighbors. And so, in a community soon after, 9/11, and you're having all these, there's, a lot of emotion, there's a lot of things going on. You have your own personal thoughts and ideas of what the world is, what's going on in the world and where's the world going. And as I got out and started talking to our neighbors, I was like, you know what? I'm not the only one that thinks like this. My neighbors think like this. My neighbors have these ideas. They have these thoughts. And I hit on about 4,000 doors in that campaign and talked to a lot of people. And a lot of people that, don't even come to meetings like this. They're living their life, they're raising their families, they're working hard, trying to make things better in their life. And don't, get out and talk to in the public square as often as what a lot of us do here in this room. And but I learned so much from them, and was just, I guess it helped me in my understanding of what I thought was right and where things were going and what the values were in our community. It helped solidify all that in my mind. And so I was excited, win or lose, that it was a great experience. Well, election day comes, and I was not favored to win at all, and I was running against a 10-year incumbent, and election night comes, and we won by 249 votes. So if you ever think that your vote doesn't matter, it does, and I'll tell you that it does, because, but I really do believe that it was going door to door, talking to neighbors, that made the difference. And so I got down to the State House, trying to understand and learn how it all worked. Served in the Indiana State House for 6 years, and then in the Indiana Senate for 2 years, and then I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2010. And between that time frame, so many things happened. As we were talking a little earlier, about how when you start looking back on your life, you start seeing the different phases, and you learn so much during those phases. We think back to the 80s. At the time of the 80s, from what I remember, it was hard. I remember the 88 drought, and that's what was, really made an impression on me, that it was hard that year. And so I always thought the 80s was bad. It was tough, and it was hard. The 90s were great. Everybody, the economy was booming, things were going really well, but 2000s were kind of different. Started out, with a tough election, and then you had, and of course, 9/11 that really sent us a different course. It brought the country together, but then, we kind of done these, we twisted back and forth in 2000s. And so looking back and having that perspective is really helpful. I don't think 80s music is bad at all, like my sons say it is. I think it's great. And it's like, if we got anything out of the 80s, we got great music. That's debatable. But anyway, so that's so helpful. And then, so in 2000, and now looking back, here in our state in Indiana, and I want to talk a little bit about leadership and the difference of what leadership can make. And I don't want this to ever come across as partisan, because leadership starts with, well, where do we want to go? So my belief is that, I love freedom, I love independence, I like the opportunity to do what I want to try to do and hope to do. If I fail, it's on me. It's not somebody else's fault. Take personal responsibility and work together, build teams, build a company. Those are the values that I believe that the United States economy is built on, and that our values are built on. Family and faith. Those are all so important. Those are all very personal to all of us. And so in 2002, Frank O'Bannon was our governor at the time when I was first elected. Great man, such a nice man. I remember him walking down the aisle, and he walked up to me and he said my name. I'd never met him before. And I was so impressed with the fact that he knew my name, and he was the governor of Indiana, and he was a very kind man. Then he actually passed away in 2003, 2004, and Joe Kernan became our governor. So serving under two governors in a short amount of time, both very, very nice people. And that's one of the things I think that we don't hear enough about from the media today and in politics. We think that the other side, they are bad people. Actually, they have different values, they have different ideas, but that doesn't make them bad people all the time. There are some that take advantage of the system, wrong, and they should pay for the actions that they do. But generally, people they're very nice, and you get the chance to sit down and talk to them. You learn a lot, and that's what I found quickly, is that by talking to people on both sides of the aisle, you do learn a lot, and it helps you formulate what's possible. And then Mitch Daniels came into office, and Mitch was a very different type of a leader, and I feel like he was the type of leader we needed at the time here in Indiana. Things were just kind of muddling along. We weren't really sure exactly, who are we, where are we going? State government was static. There was not much, it was stagnant. There wasn't a whole lot going on. We didn't know how do we spur the economy on. We're surrounded by Illinois, which, you know, being next door to Illinois makes life easy because they are such a mess. We look pretty good. And I think we were kind of just banking on that. It's like, well, we're not Illinois. It could be worse. And, but, you know, Mitch really made an effort to say, you know what, we are Indiana, we're Hoosiers, and we can be so much more and can be so much better. And I just remember him being willing to go out and do things that were unconventional, and it was not easy. I mean, the first one was, I mean, you remember daylight savings time, the whole debate around daylight savings time. That was a hard one, and I had to vote on that. Don't ask me how I voted. I'm sure it's probably not the right way some people may want or not want, but I still think my proposal was to split it 30 minutes, and we just, and then move and actually this is true, if you look at the map, the timeline is actually supposed to be through Columbus, Ohio. It's supposed to come off of Michigan, on the east side of Michigan, and go through Columbus, Ohio. But what presidential candidate ever is going to say, let's move the timeline from the west side of Indiana to the center of Ohio? They're not going to do it because they know that's political suicide, because every president has to win Ohio to be the president. So that's never going to happen. We as Hoosiers, we got to live with it. And but anyway, so then it went to the major moves and the toll road lease, and then it was telecom, and it was just every year he was hitting on all these tough issues, balancing the budget. I remember us saying, you know, we're going to balance the budget in 2 years, and he balanced it in 1 year. And so he set us on this trajectory of good, strong economic policy, and you know, we're seeing the impact of it today, and we're ahead in the Midwest. If you look at economic numbers here in the Midwest and around the country, Indiana is garnering attention for the strong economic activity that we have here. And so, again, those decisions back then, while tough, have put us in a great position. Education. I mean, you look at the schools that we have here in Indiana. We have so many great schools. I sit on the board of Trine University, so I got to put in a plug for Trine University. But the school is growing rapidly. Indiana Wesleyan, growing so fast. We've got so many great institutions here in our state, giving young people the opportunity to advance in their personal life and in their life economically. It gives them opportunity to go out and find good jobs. And so those were great years. Well, then we hit the recession. 2009, I mean, we all, again, it had such an impact on us. And I think, I was telling someone earlier this morning, it's like, even though we're in 2018, every time there's a little slowdown or a little hiccup, we're all like, oh no, is this, you know, are we going back to 2009? It's a part of our psyche. And, and that's not a bad thing all in all, but, you know, we came through a very tough moment. And in 2010, I was elected to Congress. And you know, looking back, it was probably one of the most difficult times in Washington, policy-wise, because we had President Barack Obama. Republicans come in 2010, and it was the healthcare changes. It was there was a big divide, and I would still say there's a large divide in Washington. I enjoyed my experience in the Indiana State House much more than I enjoyed my experience in Congress. You know, they do say that if you ever, I felt, and I still feel that if I had a limited amount of time to live, I would want to live it as a member of Congress, because it was the longest 6 years of my life. But I learned a lot, and I am recovering. But you know, that time in my life in Washington, it was such a great experience, and actually it did go by quite quickly as I look back now. But I remember it was hard getting people on the same page to you know, move us in the direction that we want to go. And I often felt like I wasn't being heard. And so I don't know how many of you feel that same way, but it's like we all want to be heard. And I want to touch on this just real quickly from another speech that I shared, that, you know, I was watching our president, and you watch today's president. I mean, Trump he is rewriting the model. Maybe not rewriting it, he may have just thrown it out. It's just going to be the Trump model. That might be the only model we ever see again. I don't know. I mean, it is transformed politics, and but good, some bad. I think the rhetoric today is it's not civil. I mean, and I think part of it is social media. We can say things. We are able to be heard more today than we've ever been before. I think what people are frustrated with now is there's so much noise that they don't get their voice. It's not being heard because of all the other noise. But as I watched presidents, as I watched our leadership in the House and the Senate, but then also watched leadership in my own life, whether it was my grandfather, whether it was my father, people in our local community, one of the things that I've learned is that the good leaders always listen well. I don't know if you've ever found that. You like being in a conversation where you have a lot of respect for the person across the table from you, but that person is really listening to you. And it's all of a sudden you stop and think about it. It's like, I'm doing more of the talking. They're the person that I should be listening to. And but they're really listening, and I believe that's a sign of a great leader. So leadership starts with listening. And that might be where it ends. Okay. So as I was just saying, we all want to be heard. People in politics want to know that their voice is being heard, and we live in a representative democracy. And a lot of people say, well, we live in a democratic system of government. Well, we do, but there's another level to it. And that's I will argue for our system of government any day of the week. The United States Constitution has laid it out. It has lasted for over almost 250 years, which is really remarkable. And to know that this form of government has worked for that long through different viewpoints. One of the things that we heard on a trip over to Europe was they get frustrated with the United States because every 4 years or 8 years, our leadership can change, and they don't know if we're going to have a dovish president or a hawkish president. And to me, frankly, I think that's kind of cool because you know what? It keeps them on their toes. Don't strong military, but that helps us get to the table to talk. I mean, you look at what President Trump is doing right now in North Korea. I would have never guessed that 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I really felt like we were on a path towards some sort of engagement with North Korea, not knowing what the outcome may be. But having a strong military presence is great to have as a tool. It's not what we lead with. It's often what we should be have right in our back pocket, and let others know that, hey, we're here for peace. We're here to bring law and order, and not to rule the world, but to make sure that we protect the innocent and to help countries be successful. So we all want to be heard. Social media has changed the way we communicate. It's almost freaky. I was on the phone the other day with Department of Transportation, and the lady on the other end said she was in Idaho, and I'm there by my computer, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I typed her name, and I was like, I wonder if her name comes up. Sure enough, there she was, and it was like, that's really freaky. I mean, she's probably doing the same to me. Really freaky. But we have the ability to interact and communicate more than ever before, and which is really, really, I think it's great. President Trump, this has been almost a year now, but at the time, Trump had 46 million followers on Twitter. And that's a huge number. At the time, Hillary Clinton had 21 million followers on Twitter. So they both have this huge ability to communicate to Americans in a way that other presidents, other politicians didn't have the chance to do that. So, of course, what is listening? It's taking notice of and acting on what someone said and gives one's attention to a sound. And I think, again, as we say, as we talk a lot about are people listening to me, we get frustrated because maybe things aren't going the direction we want them to go. That's just going to be part of life. This is a great picture because this describes Washington, D.C. so well. This guy, he's running. You can see the crowd back here of all these runners. And he's not a runner, but he's just running out in front of the crowd. So technically in D.C., this is leadership. I could name names. So leadership is about people, and it's not about yourself. Leaders care about people and they care about results. They know, they hear from the conference, they hear from the caucus, and they take the time to listen, and then they formulate and that message that they're hearing, and they take time to listen to the individuals. You know, I'm really going to go off trail here just real quickly, but yeah, I don't know if you all had any conversations about a narcissistic individual or narcissistic leaders. Well, politics, it's a breeding ground for narcissism. I mean, it's you're talking to this person, then you go over here and talk to this person, and if those two people talk to each other, you may be in trouble, but that's the way the system works, and that's why accountability really matters in life. It doesn't matter if it's in politics or if it's outside of politics, but I know for me personally, in my world, it's so important to have accountability, and making sure that you're being honest and you're being truthful, and that you're willing to give the honest information, because that's how we're going to ultimately tackle a problem. If you're not being truthful, I would rather tell our employees that just tell me the problem. It's okay. If you're going to try to sugarcoat it and not really tell me what's wrong, then we can't fix the problem and move forward. So there's a lot of stories related to that because of people not wanting to be completely honest with you, and they're trying to get their way, and eventually you're going to be found out. Listening to what the challenges and problems are allows a leader to gather the information, look at the big picture, and apply solutions and a vision to move everyone forward. Leadership here's the personal items. This is a big, I think it's when the leader takes time and says, hey, it's your birthday today, or isn't it your anniversary next week? Well, isn't it your kids' Little League game? How are they doing? And taking the time to ask questions like that, or to know what those answers are. Of course, in births and deaths, personal tragedies, leadership is still, it's about life. We are all human, and we all have personal things going on in our personal lives every day. And when leaders take time to pay attention to those things, it makes a difference in people's lives. Once you listen, you can lead. And I believe that, I'm going to go back to President Trump for a second here, but I think a lot of people feel like he doesn't listen, that he's not hearing. I know the media portrays it that way. I can tell you that's just not the case. I've been in the room with him several times, and he is very good at listening. And it's remarkable. He's a different person on TV than what he is behind closed doors. And he's not the brash, talker that he comes across at on stage. Now, why, or I don't know, you have to ask why he does it, but it's obviously an effective tool. But he does have this amazing ability to sit down in a room, and he praises other people around him. I remember the first time he came in to our conference meeting in Washington, and he gets up, and it wasn't about him at all. It was about, hey, this guy's doing this for me, this guy's doing this for our team, this guy is killing it on data information. And it was all about his team. And he didn't talk about himself a whole lot. And I just really found that encouraging. It was refreshing, because too many times leaders make it about themselves rather than about the team that's around them. Leadership needs to show vision and purpose, and leadership needs to show that we care and that we're willing to work harder than anyone else. All right, that's the end of that. So, again, we live in the greatest country in the world, and communication is such a key point to all of this. I have to always, I love the military. I did not serve in the military, but I love our military. I had a chance to serve, or to work with a lot of people in the military, and communication in the military is one of a kind. The acronyms in the military, there's more acronyms in the military than Matt, you know that. But what is said can often be interpreted differently, and that's why it falls on us as individuals and as leaders to make sure we're communicating well and that what we're saying is being heard. But there's the story that the Joint Chiefs of Staff sent down an order to to all 4 branches of government about a particular building. Well, they sent it to the Navy first, and they said, secure the building. And so the Navy goes, shuts all the lights off, locks the doors, and leaves. They just secured the building. Well, the order comes down to the Army. The Army is told to secure the building. Army goes into the building, sets up shop, protects it, doesn't let anybody in, and they have secured the building. The Marines were told to secure the building. And they go to the building, they have tanks, they have armored vehicles, they have machine guns, they have surrounded the building, and they have killed everyone inside the building. They have secured the building. The Air Force is told to secure the building. Well, they take out a 3-year lease with an option to buy. So what is told?
Add a pool.
Add a pool. So what's told to people is not always what is heard. And it's one of the important things in leadership is what we are communicating and what we're saying is also on us to be sure that it's heard. It's not always going to work that way, as the story illustrates. But it's a challenge. We have to continue. We have to continue to go day after day and keep our sights clear and to focus on the goal and to remember it's always about the people that are around us. So with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions and thoughts. I really enjoyed this. I think this group is a great network. Jim and Jerry have done a fantastic job of organizing this group into a place where we can network and learn from one another. And so feel free to make a comment or ask a question if you'd like. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
For the last week, we have heard about George H.W. Bush and his life of service. Everything in others has said. Do you think that this week will have a trajectory change in our nation?
It's a great question, and it's a great thought. It is always remarkable how when someone in leadership passes away, it gives everybody the chance to pause and to look at the life of a particular individual. You know, George H.W. Bush, he was really I remember Ronald Reagan, but I really got to see and remember all of George H.W. Bush's time as president. And what a remarkable person. And his, he obviously wasn't perfect, and people, the first person who said that he wasn't perfect. But just looking at what he could have been, or what he could have been like after the election in 1992, when Ross Perot jumped in and basically cost him the presidency. And Ross Perot was another Texan, and the dislike that they could have had for each other could have gone on till his death. And what I remember is the gracefulness that he had in losing. And I think that's one of the things that's often, we remember how people win, but we also remember how people lose. And I think it's more important as individuals of what are we like when we lose. And George H.W. Bush really exhibited that. He was, his service was his whole life. It was really remarkable. Do I think it changes Washington? I don't. It's so polarized right now. There's such a struggle for the direction of the United States. And there's just, people are, they have their own agendas. The agencies are large, the bureaucracies are large, unaccountable. The hardest job, I don't like the way President Trump does everything, but I'm a fan of him from the outside that Washington needed someone to come in and shake it up. It needed to be, it was getting, I felt there was a lack of accountability. And somebody needed to come in and hold it accountable from the outside. And Trump has done that to an extent, but it's tremendously hard. He had this very challenging entry into Washington because he didn't know a lot of the people. It's a club, and part of that's just natural, but part of it also is on us to self-govern ourselves and to say, you know what, that's not what we want government to be. And so Trump comes in, and he's trying to select people that will help him get the job done. Well, there's people that they are cloaked in, you know, sheep's wool and wolves, and you know, they're there. That people will do that. And so very, very challenging. You know, to get back to George H.W. Bush though, I think that it does, even for a week, it gives us a chance to stop and just reflect on a person who his life for this country. You could see it in his kids. What another great testament to his life is the way that his children have followed in his footsteps, down to his grandchildren. George P. Bush down in Texas is serving as the land commissioner in Texas, and I suspect he'll probably be governor someday. A super, super nice person, and that comes from the grandfather and the grandmother, and what a legacy that George and Barbara Bush have left for this country. So I hope it lasts longer than what I've said, but I'm not too optimistic. Anyone else? Yes.
Where do you get?
No pressure. Yeah. You know what? I just have a lot of sources. I think it's good to take sources. You know, watch. I mean, I'm a Fox News watcher, but I watch MSNBC, watch CNN, watch NBC. I think it's good to watch, you know, as many sources as you can get. But I will tell you, as an individual that, you know, saw what was going on in Washington, media is very biased. They're just very biased. You know, I remember my wife's grandmother. She was in her 80s, and it was in it was like 2010 or 2011 roughly, and Dan Rather is on TV at her house, and she's like, "Whatever you say, Dan, whatever you say." And I'm like, "Oh, Grandma." But that's another place that needs a lot of help is journalism, because it's so powerful. That was the one thing that I was surprised when I got to Washington, that, you know, I thought the president had a lot of power. They do. I thought Congress had a lot of power. It doesn't as much as I thought. The judges, the courts have a lot of power, but the most powerful was the media because of the impact, the influence, and the message that they send across the country. Hollywood has a lot of power, so it's the communication institutions in this country have tremendous power, and it does matter who pulls those levers. You know, all of us are going to have our angles on when we communicate and our leanings one way or the other, and that's fine. But I think the media is out of control right now. They are just completely biased, and they're not about true journalism anymore like they should be. So, yes, sir.
Could you give me an example of one that you recommend leadership in listening, one that was recommended to you that you read?
Yeah, Good to Great is one I really enjoy. Simon Sinek is another author. Start with Why. In fact, that was the one thing too that was really neat in Congress is they would bring in a lot of authors, and I don't know why we didn't ever listen to these great people. They knew what they said, but there was a lot of information, and that's one thing. I mean, talk about information. There's tons of information in Washington D.C. and get overloaded with so much information, but it's a chance to learn a lot. But it goes back to that's why I think servant leadership is so critical in helping people get to where they want to go. That's what I get a thrill out of. You know, my brother, he called me when I was still out in D.C. and he said, you know, I'm just not happy doing what I'm doing right now. And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And so we talked about that for a couple of weeks, and pretty soon an opportunity came along, and I said, let's do it. I'll be a partner with you. You run it. And it's great for me. I'm the older brother. You know, I'm still telling my younger brother. You know, he doesn't realize it yet. I hope he's not watching this morning. He's at the shop and I'm here. But I really do enjoy helping people get to where they want to go. And I learn a lot. It's something that people in Washington, most people are very nice there. The joke goes that the first year you're in Congress, you're trying to figure out how you got there. The the second year you're in Congress, you're trying to figure out how everybody else got there. And because we have such unique backgrounds, we're so different. I walked up onto two gentlemen talking. One was from Boston, Massachusetts. The other was from New Orleans, Louisiana. I could not understand them. And but that's what's cool about it all, is that we're very diverse in the country. You know, the diversity in the state of Indiana is not as quite as much, even though you go from Evansville, Indiana, to the region in Northwest Indiana. You need a passport somewhere. I don't know where you cross the line, but they're very different. But that's what's neat about our country and our state, is that we are different. But if we can come together and have those common values, that's what makes us a strong nation and a strong state. But yeah, those would be the two books that I highly recommend. Good to Great, I think, is one of the best, because you have to have the right people in the right spot, and leadership's not easy, but it's critical to success. Yes, sir.
How do you think they can get control of spending? And let me just ask you a question for highlight.
Yeah.
You were in Congress for 6 years. Do you get pensions?
Well, I didn't take the pension.
But
I denied it. Go ahead, finish it.
well, I mean, why would you get a pension for serving the Congress for 6 years for the rest of your life?
That's what I asked. I think, for one, I do think term limits is the one thing that would help change Washington. It doesn't have to be 6 years, it doesn't have to be 8 years. Even if it was 12 or 18 years, at least there's a time when you just move on. Let somebody else do it. I think you should have a certain amount, there should be some length to it. That way, the bureaucrats, the lobbyists, the institution around the legislative branch isn't running the place. So I think there needs to be some time to it. I did not take the pension. And when I went down to the benefits office and I told the lady across the desk that I wasn't taking a pension, she looked at me, she's like, do you know how much money you're giving up? I said, I don't even want to know. I said, because I know for a fact, and I heard it from others, they ran for office again because of their pension.
Right.
And that's the wrong reason to run. It's the wrong reason, period. I mean, it shouldn't be about that. And that was the one thing I just felt as a person who wanted to serve, that it shouldn't be about pension. Now, I don't begrudge anybody. If that's the decision that they make, that's fine. But I just think I don't think there should be a pension for those in office. Now, military, other government workers, that's different. But we choose to run and to serve. Pay the salary, that's fine. Pay the insurance, whatever. But don't encourage people to run
A portion of their day in off of the Capitol Hill, on the phone fundraising.
Yep.
Has that changed any, or where are we with that?
It's worse. It's the same. It's worse. That was the thing that I got frustrated the most, and I don't know how to fix that entirely, because it takes money to run a campaign. I mean, a congressional race, to win a congressional race, you need to at least shoot for $1 million, if not more. That's to get through a primary. It's more like probably $1.5 million. I mean, Russ, you guys know that through Banks' office. I mean, it takes money, and it's the advertising, it's the getting your name out there. There are real costs. It's not like money is just going into people's pockets, because you go into mail. It's expensive to run a campaign. I mean, Hillary Clinton spent $1 billion. Trump didn't spend quite that much. Either way, he still built up publicity throughout his life, that he had, this celebrity status that he had built that did cost money. But the amount of money that it takes to run campaigns, it's very expensive. Well, in the federal level, we have these caps, and the cap is roughly $2,700 per individual that you can give to a congressional candidate per election. There's all these different rules, but you're capped. I don't think those caps, there's a good side and a bad side to it. It depends what you want. But what the bad side is that you do force people to go over and sit in a little room across the street from the Capitol, people calling hundreds of people asking for political contributions. What we do here in Indiana is there's no limit what a person can give, but you have to disclose it all. And that way, and I think that's a better model, because if somebody's going to come in and try to buy an individual's way to an office, it's going to be disclosed. People are going to find out about it. The other side's going to tell people, hey, you know what? Whoever it is, they just gave them $1 million to run for office. Who do you think controls that person? And so I think that's the downside, but at least you get full disclosure. The flip side is if you have these caps, yeah, no one can pay somebody's campaign for their campaign, but then it drives the person who should be working in office over to making call after call after call, trying to raise money, $2,700 at a time, or $100 at a time, or 10, or and then they do mailings and things like that. So it's become a business too. I mean, the campaign industry, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and so you have all these political consultants that are charging exorbitant amount of monthly fees to run people's campaigns. And so Washington, I mean, our local congressmen are probably still the most connected to our communities. It's tough for senators to get around the whole state, cover a whole state. That's very challenging. And so they're constantly buying TV ads. Those are expensive. Mail, but something should change, and I think I'd rather follow the Indiana campaign finance model than what we have in Washington. So, yes, sir.
So, topic that you discussed about leadership, starting with listen. So, can you give examples in your experience in politics, business, where you saw good examples of leadership? And I'm curious to know more in regard to politics, the political scene. It's a bunch of leaders in the room, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's a leader, real or imagined. How do you lead with listening and be effective when everyone in the room believes in something?
That's a great question. And so Kevin McCarthy, he was the majority leader, not the Speaker of the House, but Speaker of the House and majority leader. He would always he had this long table in his office, and he'd invite a bunch of us to come in there and hash out an issue. And you're right. I mean, when our congressmen come back to our districts, they're a leader right there. Well, then they go to Washington. Well, there's leaders above, in positions above them. And so how do you interact with each other? And what I saw is the people that constantly talked, people started tuning them out. It's like, oh, here we go again, that person's talking again. And they start tuning them out. I think it's finding the balance between listening and then speaking. And speaking at the appropriate time and the right time. And that's what I always appreciate. There's certain people that I would see, maybe Kevin McCarthy, he worked very hard to be the leader, but what I saw was he was always watching the caucus. He was always listening, having these private conversations. He did a very good job listening, and then he was able to stand up and speak, and he already knew what everybody was thinking. It's the same thing in the room. As the leader sits there and listens, pretty soon he's going to find the consensus, and then you got to be able to put it all together and communicate that well when everybody's heads are going, yep, he understands what I'm thinking, and he's got the attention of everybody else. That's why I'm supporting that person as the leader. So there has to be a presence as well, but that's a great question. Yes, sir.
If there were one, say, agency that you would hope that Trump might just go after, as he's kind of been a little bit of a rebel, what agency would that be? And I'll let you can exempt Treasury and education, since there's a lot of bankers and education people.
The one that I wish he would fix it's had its challenges for many, many years. So it's correct if I'm wrong, I think it's the largest healthcare provider in the country. I mean, and if we can't get the VA right, why do we think we can fix everything But I think that's the agency that I would, as an American, appreciate him fixing the most. So it's great.
Kind of moving away from politics for just a moment, because you've been successful. Define success, and then how do you get there?
Oh, boy. Well, look at the time. I think success is, we all have to determine in our own hearts, in our minds, what is success. As a person of faith, I know that as long as I'm doing in life, treating people right, living by, and honoring God, first of all, but then also financial success. I love business. I mean, I'm enjoying life right now because I'm in business. There's good days and there's bad days. Good things happen one day, and you think, hey, all right, we got to go in the right direction. The next day, something else it collapses. But I think it's important that we all know in our hearts, and what do I want to accomplish? There's some things in life that I have not accomplished, and I don't see it as success. But there's other things in life that I do see as have made a difference, and a difference for good. And I think that's what each of us have to do. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here. And
Thank you so much again, Brenda. We really appreciate it. We wanted to present you with a gift on behalf of First Fridays and Indiana Wesleyan University.
all right. Thank you very much. I'll show this to Dr. Brooks.